Hey y'all, welcome to Shade in the City. It's your girl Trees here, and we're here to get into season 1, episode 146 of Beyond the Gates, y'all. So if you have not already, please do me a big favor, all of my Shade Squad and my new viewers, and go ahead and hit that like button for me. And if you liking the vibe and you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do so, okay? And y'all, let's go ahead and get into this recap because y'all know I'm behind. I'm trying to play catch up. So let's get into it and let's get shady.
Lights drip on the skyline paint. Shade in the city, true hits like a banger. I said it, I meant it, no need for disclaimers. Haters right away, but they just false claimers. Concrete beats are heavy like cinder. Looking for one, but the streets feel winter. No filters, no edits, I'm raw with my splinters. My life a movie, they watching the trailer. Said it, I'm not gonna hold you. Shade in the city, the life in the mold. You like and subscribe if you feeling the vibe. This is my word, I just let you inside. Said it, I'm not gonna hold you. Shade in the city, my words gon' console you. Like and subscribe if you feeling the vibe.
So we start off this episode. Marcel walks into the casino to find the same dealer. I didn't get his name, but the same dealer that Joey paid off. That y'all told me that he ain't regularly worked there, but he was there. Okay. And so he's, of course, alarmed to see Marcel because he knows he's the enforcer. But Marcel said, nah, I ain't here for you and I ain't here for Joey. I'm just here to wet my whistle. And so he tells him, Joey down at the police station doing magic tricks and whatnot. And he tells him about how Joey was able to remove him from the video. And I said, well, lucky you. And I don't know why you would share that, but I guess maybe to tell him, like, you better not tell nobody that I was here because nobody thinks that I was here. Right. So then Vanessa and Donnell, they're still down at the station watching the surveillance footage of Doug. And so finally, once Vanessa gets tired, Donnell finally stops. And he was like, I was just hoping, to see some moment of clarity before, my dad got in the car and drove inebriated after, everything that he's seen firsthand working at the hospital. And so Vanessa is just more upset that he wagered his watch that she got him. It feels like, that was basically Doug feeling like he ain't have nothing else to live for. So y'all remember, I believe it was episode 144. Martin had this bright idea that he was going to turn himself in, and I didn't think that was really smart. Well, we're back there, okay? So him and Smitty are talking, and Smitty is yelling for these smarty kids to come downstairs, and then he tells Martin, Martin, sit your ass down. I was like, oh, like he's one of the damn kids. So Smitty's upset that Martin is thinking about turning himself in, okay? And Martin tells him, well, I plan to do it before I even told you my secret. And so Smitty said, yeah, because you was backed against the corner. And it makes no sense for you to tell on yourself at this point. And so Martin said, well, it's not about me and wanting to be heroic. And, it's more about wanting you to look at me with respect. And so Smitty was like, yeah, you throwing yourselves to the wolves isn't making me respect you. Okay. And he's really trying to understand Martin's logic. And so Martin tells him that, basically keeping the secret is what almost cost him everything. And he feels like this will earn Smitty's trust somehow. And Smitty said, absolutely not. And then he grabs the family photo and reminds him of why it would be stupid to turn himself in. And I said, yep, I'm with you, Smitty. Now, see what love games get you. Now you see what Martin is all about. Now you can't talk him off the ledge. That's what you get. Now, back at Nicole's, Nicole is filling Danny in on Martin and Smitty and, what's going on with them and how she still has hope that they're going to work everything out. So Danny is like, damn, everybody on your side of the family seem to be having relationship problems at the moment. You know what I mean? Martin and Smitty, Kat, you. Nicole claims, no, I've made peace with, everything that's happened, right? And she said, I just want to live, vicariously through my kids and their happiness. So then Daddy's like, girl, we need a drink for all this. And Nicole's like, I ain't got none. It's a dry house. We ain't got none. And so Danny's like, I don't believe you. And she said, well, I don't care what you believe because you ain't getting it from me. Danny decides not to have a drink. And she tells Nicole, look, I know you're still upset about me running off and marrying Andre. And Nicole said, I think what it is because it had more to do with Bill. And Danny says, look, although, me and Andre's marriage is a little unconventional, we do care about each other. And that's very real. And I said, that's right. Okay. So Nicole asked Danny, like, please just don't hurt him. I love Andre like he's one of my own. And especially after him losing his parents, like, he might not be able to suffer that kind of heartbreak. You know what I'm saying? And so Danny said, look, I'm not playing games with his heart. Quit playing games with my heart. With my heart. With my heart. Hey, hey. I should have known from the start. Oh Lord. Anyway, wow, look, I'm taking myself back to high school. So Danny commends Nicole on her speech about Doug at the memorial and questions, why somebody who would repair hearts would get behind the wheel intoxicated, right? So she asked Nicole, did you know that Doug was spiraling like this? And Nicole admits, yeah, I knew he had demons, but I ain't think that they would win. And so Danny talks about how, she feels so bad for Vanessa and questions, I hope she gonna get through it. And Nicole said, Vanessa's gonna get through it, but her being okay is a different story. So then we hop back over to the station, and Donnell is watching this video on repeat of Doug's, final moments in the casino, right? So he's like, yo, let's check the parking lot camera. And so we could see Doug getting into the car. And Joey's like, sorry, actually, so what had happened was, that thing has been busted for months. It ain't worked. And I've reached out to the manager about it, but to no avail. There's just been no repairs. Okay. So Vanessa starts flipping out on Donnell. She's like, what are we doing? What are we doing, Donnell? The man is gone. Okay. I just say that I believe his name is Alex. Is it Alex Childs? Is it, y'all will correct me. I know they call him AC on Twitter, but he acted his behind off. And I will say I was on the fence when they first introduced him, and maybe it was just jitters and whatever, because I do feel like as we've watched him throughout the past couple days, his performance has absolutely gotten stronger. Kudos to him. So now Jacob looks at the video and he was like, well, you know what? There's a clue there, Deputy Dogood. He's like, maybe we should go and talk to the dealer, because that was the last person he was with. And maybe he could kind of tell you, what was in his mind. So Joey said, oh, don't even worry about that. I got you, player. So even though he don't work for me no more, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up Drake, because that's his name. I didn't know his name at first, but it's Drake. So he said, what I'm going to do is call up Drake. And I'm going to have him come down here and, and talk to y'all. And he asked Donnell, would that be enough for you? Is that what you need, to give you the closure that you're looking for? Donnell is like, yeah, no, I would appreciate that. And then he looks at Vanessa and he's like, Mom, you don't think this is a good idea? And Vanessa's like, hell no. Hell no. To the no. Hey. So then Marcel is down at the casino talking to Drake about how Joey wiped the video, but he knows better than to think that, Joey did it for his sake at all. And because they were talking about how he was on the edge of his retirement, but basically Joey stopped him from going to retirement, as we remember. So Drake mentions that Joey reached out, wanted him to go down to the police station, and he was like, well, why would Joey? So he starts to question, well, what would Joey want from me? And so Marcel advises him, whatever it is, you better do what you're told, okay? Because if you don't, then you better keep your head on a swivel, or Joey will be canceling your Christmas. And I said, not canceling Christmas. Okay. Back over at the Smarty household, Smitty done shoved this family photo in Martin's face to remind him of what he has to lose. And Martin thinks, look, I think the kids deserve to know the full story. And he reminds Smitty, look, you were the one that said you weren't doing no more family secrets. And I really feel like these kids are smart enough and already know that there's more to the story. And he was like, and what are we supposed to do? They almost grown. We can't shield them forever. Smitty argues they've suffered enough. Okay? Between June, everything, they've suffered enough. Okay? And now you're going to put them through some more. And he asked Martin to think about how reckless this decision is and all the people that it would affect, i.e. Vernon, Anita, Joey, Bill. I'm sure Ted would be wrapped up in there somewhere. So Elon. So he questions, what good is this sacrifice if you're going to lose everything? And then speculates, oh, I see what you're doing. You down here playing love games just like I was playing it with you. I see what you're doing. Okay, I see you. You see me. We see each other. I see what you're doing. Okay, you playing me. You just came down here telling me that so you get me all worked up. Love games. So Smitty believes that Martin is playing him like the politician that he is, and Martin is confused on why Smitty would think he's trying to manipulate him after he just got done telling him that he was trying to earn his trust. And I was like, that's a great point. Smitty said he don't know what to believe, and so Martin is floored, like, damn, that's what you really think about me? You really think the worst of me? And Smitty said, I don't know what to think because you lied to me before. And I said, well, two things can be true at the same time, can't they? So now Martin admits, I did lie to protect you, to protect myself. But this isn't a strategy to play you, okay? And he goes to show Smitty receipts of him reaching out to Jacob to talk. Okay, Smitty admits that, I might have overreacted. And Martin says, hey, I heard you when it comes in regards to the fallout. And he says, look, I can handle a scandal, but what I can't handle is my husband thinking I'm a fraud. And so then we see Smitty obviously apologize. Now, Nicole and Danny are still talking about Vanessa's emotional state, and Danny mentions how Vanessa basically needs someone to lean on at this point. So Nicole tells him she already got somebody to lean on. Okay. So Danny was like, "Oh, girl, spill that tea. I want to know." So Nicole mentions how Vanessa been getting real close with Joey Armstrong, and so Danny is like, "Girl, what? Who? Okay." And so Nicole says, look, I don't know if they slept together yet, but if they haven't, they damn sure close to it. And now we see Marcel down at the casino telling Drake, basically warning him, stick to the story of Doug being inebriated, gambled heavy, lost everything, and stumbled out this month. Okay. Marcel lets him know, oh, clearly Joey don't trust you to stick to things as well, because he texts me too. Mine's Drake, look, you saw what happened to Doug. You saw his mistake, and you saw who handled it. Okay? So you better come correct. Vanessa is down at the station letting Donnell know that she has no interest in meeting Drake. She says she done had enough for today after Doug's memorial. And I kind of agree with that. I get her wanting to be there for her son, and he's hurting right now. And obviously he's needing some type of closure. I don't know if we needed to do all this on the day of the memorial. Maybe it's just me. So I don't even think they made it to the repast. We still ain't had our oxtails. Elaine still ain't brought her chicken. I still ain't had none of Princess's 7-Up pound cake. And I forgot who said they was making iced tea, but I ain't even have a glass of iced tea yet. Get it together, y'all. Vanessa goes on about how, basically she was hurt to hear everyone talk about who they thought Doug was versus who she knew him to be. And so Donnell was like, oh, so you knew about Doug being at the casino that night? And he was like, did you, try to stop him? Did y'all fight about it? And so that's when Vanessa has her flashback to her last call with Doug, and she starts getting all emotional. And that's when Joey returns to overhear, her say that basically if she could have, if there's anything she could have done to stop Doug, she would have. Right. So back in Nicole, Zanny accuses Nicole of diagnosing Vanessa. And Nicole says, well, nah, girl, I just have legitimate concern. And Danny tells her, look, girl, as you know from my story, the heart wants what it wants. Okay. And sometimes you can't stop somebody from who they want to be with. Nicole said, okay, I received that. And says, I guess that goes for Kat's situation as well. And said, she said, I feel like I should be intervening. But I know if I try to keep Kat from being with Tomas, she just gonna go even harder, like Chelsea said. And so Danny was like, she tries to segue into Ted, which obviously Nicole is not interested in talk about. So Danny was like, okay, so let's talk about Carlton, girl. So Nicole was like, he's just a friend. You know what I'm saying? And Danny said, and that friend, I mean, I don't pack most of my friends when I leave the room. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. So Nicole brings up, but that's still Ted's partner. And Danny said, okay, and Ted don't get a vote in this, especially not when the man is hot buttered toast with cinnamon on top. And I said, that part. Okay. And Nicole said, look, it's deeper than just Ted. I'm actually at this point, I'm done with love. Back at the Smarty house, Smitty is telling Martin that, damn, my bad. I was a little out of line for, accusing you of manipulation. And Martin tells him, no, you said it because that's how you really felt. So Martin was like, damn, I can't believe that you would think that I would weaponize turning myself in and said, you know what, this is why I'm trying to do something drastic. So Smitty refuses, said, look, what we're not going to do is you fall on this sword because you think you, oh, when you doing something. And Martin was like, well, I feel like I'm stranded in purgatory. And when and where is the finish line, Smitty? How long are we going to keep playing these love games? How many more levels is it to this shit? Okay. And so Smitty says, I don't know. I really don't know. So Martin was like, all right. Martin was like, do you know who I am? I am Martin Luther King Dupree. Okay. Well, Richardson. Okay. And my grandfather is Vernon Dupree. And we are men of action. Okay. And I just can't sit around. And so Smitty starts screaming about, well, no, you gonna sit. Because you done kept a secret from me from how many years and jeopardized everything that I gave a damn about. And there's no quick fix for it. So get over it. And I said, well. And so Martin starts pleading with Smitty to, make it like it was. So then we hop back over to the police station where Donnell consoles his mother, Vanessa, but, tells her, look, I can't talk to my dad anymore. And all I have is this video and obviously the ability to talk to Drake. So Joey said, Vanessa, you've been through a lot. I get it. Let me walk you to your car. And he tells Jacob and Donnell, my former employee should be showing up any minute now. And so Jacob asks Donnell, well, your mother really been through it today. How are you holding up? Are you good? And so Donnell tells him, well, that depends. Define good or okay. So Danny can't believe that Nicole is ready to give up on love. And she's trying to talk her through it. And Nicole thinks, well, I'm too old to start over. And, I ain't trying to devote myself to some fleeting romance that ain't going to go nowhere. And so I absolutely love this scene. And Danny tells her, it sounds like you're trying to convince yourself so that it sounds logical to you. And Danny tells her, and love isn't that, never has been, and never will be. And so Danny tells Nicole that let me stick to being the emotional hurricane in the family, okay? Crashing out over a man is what I do best, okay? And she advises Nicole, get out of my lane and get back in yours, okay? That I loved that moment between them. Now, and you see the difference and how Danny handles Nicole versus Danny handling her. So Smith, back at the Smarty house, Smitty tells Martin to text Jacob and cancel that meeting before he opens up another can of worms again, okay? Martin thinks that they should talk more about it, and Smitty threatens to take his phone and do it himself if he don't do it. So finally, Martin adheres to his request, but said it still doesn't answer what's next for us. I'm trying to think about, well, what can we possibly do instead of, Martin throwing himself to the wolves? So Marcel shows up back at the station. He comes over and gives his condolences again to Donnell, but offers unwarranted advice talking about, watching your father at his darkest hour and his last moments on repeat isn't helpful. And I love when Donnell fired back at him and said, respectfully, I didn't ask for your psychological assessment. And he said, I need to know my dad's state of mind before he died. So Marcel was like, look, I wish I could help, but I ain't never met the dude. And I said, that's just awful. So Drake shows up to talk and tells him that, look, well, lucky Joey called me because I was about to skip town. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nothing left for me out here after, I lost my job over this watch. And so Donnell says, well, get the talking. And that's when we see, we jump over to Uptown where Joey and Vanessa have met up. And, she's just saying how she understands why Donnell wants answers about Doug's state of mind. And she just couldn't bear or didn't have the heart to tell him that they had gotten in a fight the night that Doug, passed away. And so especially since the fight was about Joey. So Drake, obviously, we know is at the station, and he says that, Doug came in for a high stakes game and basically was on a mission. So Donnell says, well, the story doesn't track because Doug was always a very methodical person, and he just can't believe that his dad would keep playing after losing it all. So he accuses Drake of hyping Doug up and feeding him drink. Drake looks at Jacob and said, are you conducting the interview or is he? Because it's becoming confusing, right? So Jacob's like, look, Donnell, relax. Because this ain't your job. You turn it into cat. Just saying. So Donnell asks, well, why didn't you stop my dad from driving? And so Jacob tries to remind him, Maryland law, it ain't got they ain't got nothing to do with that. Okay, we don't have those restrictions here. And Donnell said, look, I know the law and I don't give a damn. Okay. So he believes Drake kept serving Doug because, a drunk loses more. And Drake said, look, it's my job to deal cards, not babysit grown men. He tells him, look, I do feel bad about what happened to your daddy. And said, I did try to make an effort and go call an Uber. But when I came back, he was gone. So I don't know what you want me to do. Jacob was like, well, is there anyone that Doug was supposed to meet that night? And Drake tells him, as far as I know, Doug's final destination was his bed. And I said, oh my God, not me putting final destination. That is awful. But so Donnell was like, well, what was his state of mind? And like, did he say anything about my mama, my sister, me? Basically, he's just looking for something to try to make him understand why his father would leave them. And so Drake tells him, look, all I know is that Doug didn't like to lose. So then Jacob informs Drake, well, look, I know you thought you had these travel plans, but right now that's on pause because I may need to circle back and ask you a couple more questions. So Drake was like, all right, cool. I ain't going nowhere. I'll stay put because I wasn't going nowhere for real. No way. That's just me saying that he didn't really say that, obviously. And so Jacob asked Donnell, well, are you good? Is that what you was looking for? And Donnell responds, not even close. Not even close. And so Jacob offers, well, look, you know what, man? Let me take you to get something to eat and help you clear your mind. Okay. Because that's how I go down to the Orphan and that, helps me get it together. Yeah. Down at Uptown, Vanessa is asking Joey, well, what would happen if Donnell were to learn the truth? That I was with you. And Joey's like, you know what? Donnell's strong. He gonna get through it. He gonna get through it. And he tells Vanessa, and you ain't got nothing to feel guilty about. And he reminds her that, Doug brought this on himself. So then he starts talking about how, when I saw you emotional down at the station, all I wanted to do was reach out and touch somebody's hand. That's what I wanted to reach out and comfort you. Okay. And so he tells Vanessa, so, let me be your strength when you can't find any, and embraces her. So back over at the Smarty house, so Smitty suggests that they go to couples therapy, and he's like, I know we got to be careful with letting the secret slip, and it's going to be some hard work. And Martin said, well, if it's going to work, it got to be. And he agrees, hell yeah, I'm ready to go to therapy. If it means ending this nightmare. And he's like, is that going to be enough? And Smitty said, nah, that's only half the solution. Back over at Nicole's, Nicole is telling Danny that, look, you are just way off target, sis. And Danny advises Nicole, look, call it what it is, girl. You scared. You scared after Ted hurt you. And Nicole thinks, yeah, I am. And it's reasonable to protect myself after what I've been through. You remember the anniversary party. And he said, you're letting one man's betrayal dictate the rest of your life. And Nicole said, Ted just wasn't one man. That was my man. My man, my man, my man. He was her everything until basically the rug got pulled from up under them. She says she refused to ever fall like that again and says, Danny may call it crazy, but she calls it survival. Then we see Andre. I thought this was kind of cute. I said, okay. So Andre sends Danny a selfie with his shirt off, letting her know it's hubby time. Okay. So she tells Nicole, girl, I got business to attend to. But before I go, she gives Nicole an apology. And, she said, I'm sorry. My marriage imploded, and I know you thought that would never be you. And unfortunately, something similar happened to you, and I just feel like I should have set a better example. But tells Nicole, you know what? Even though I went through that, your heart is too big to close. And she said, Carlton doesn't have to be the one, but he could be the one for right now. And so I was here for it. And again, it's just, this is why I love Danny. You see how she handles her sister even after Nicole has been giving her smoke, even up to this episode. I know you see it. Okay. So Smitty, back at the Smarty house, Smitty said aside from therapy, what he want to do, they need something to build on. So Martin said, yeah, I agree. So what were you thinking? So Smitty said, we need date night. And I agree. That is very important. Back down in Uptown, Vanessa is talking to Joey about all the different emotions she's going through. And Joey tells her, well, look, you need to focus on Donnell right now, only for him to walk through the door with Jacob. And I said, well. Yeah, y'all, that was this episode of Beyond the Gates. So for the members, y'all make sure y'all meet me over here tomorrow at 8 p.m. We're gonna do our live and talk everything beyond the gates. Unfortunately, I decided not to go live this evening. One, because I just wanted to get caught up on my recaps and get those out to, everybody, the public, before we went live. And two, my Giants are playing tonight. Okay. And right now we're winning. And so I knew once I figured out we were playing tonight, I said, let me not come up here on the live and be ignoring y'all because I'm gonna be watching this game. Because we're playing Philly out of all people, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, y'all. So yeah, please do me a favor. If you haven't already, make sure y'all go ahead and like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you comment, make sure you hit the notification bell so you know when we're dropping new content, and make sure you're following us on all platforms like the Blue Sky, the IG, the Twitter, the Facebook, the TikTok, the Lemonade. And I think I got everything. Also, don't forget, we will be doing our recap of this week's episode of Reasonable Doubt. So y'all catch us on Sunday night. Love y'all. Have a good night. Bye bye.